Welcome to the Happy Mindset. Today's episode is episode number 84, and today's episode title is called One Last Thought. So today I'm joined by Ido Singer. Ido is the host of the One Last Thought podcast. The podcast is a little bit different from the norm. It's not a Q&A podcast, and it's not a podcast where Ido is doing solo episodes himself. It's actually a podcast where he invites people on to share their one last thought with humanity. So basically the key lesson that they learn in their life that they'd like other people to become aware of. So I'd recommend reaching out to him. It's a quite interesting podcast. He has a team for the episode, and he has two people sharing the key lesson centered around that team. So yeah, if you want to reach out to him, reach out to him. I've shared one of my last thoughts as well with Ido, and it'll be on a future episode. So yeah, I'd recommend reaching out to him. So the other aspect of Ido that we explore about is his passion for basketball. So today Ido is a coaching assistant in a university in America women's team. And he talks about how his passion for basketball led him to that position. He initially wanted to become an NBA player, and when he started to realize that wasn't going to come into fruition, he took a break and he eventually pivoted into coaching. So on today's episode, Ido talks about that journey, that process he went on. He also talks about leadership as well. So Ido, growing up, he didn't see himself as a vocal person. He saw himself as quite shy. But he also realized that you can lead with action. So he talks a little bit about that, how he's implemented that in his life. And he talks about creation. So to create, that's Ido's mission in life, is just to create. So he talks about how that looks like. How do you go about actually finding out what are you meant to create in the world that has meaning and purpose to you. So I enjoyed talking to Ido. I know you can get a lot from him, and I enjoyed hearing his story. And hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will see you in the next episode. Okay, so thanks for joining us today, Ido.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, man. So my first question for you is, who are you and what are you doing in the world today?
So I am Ido Singer. I am originally from Israel, born and raised over there, and moved to the States when I was about 23, just on the cusp of 24. I was growing up in the basketball realm, I guess, playing all throughout my childhood, and then into my youth, and ended up playing professionally over there. And when I fell out of love with that, I moved to the States, went to school, started coaching. Fast forward a few years, and now I'm a college basketball assistant coach on the women's side at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro.
Hmm. So was basketball always a thing that you were passionate about growing up? Like, how did you get into basketball?
Always. I remember picking up a basketball card, Patrick Ewing basketball card, and became an instant New York Knicks fan, which haunts me to this day. But I loved it so much, and I was so intrigued that my mom took me over to take this basketball class or something like that at the local Y, and I fell in love with it at the age of 7. And I'm still in love with it. I'm 40 years old, just turned 40, and still a huge passion for it. I do it every day. I just derive so much pleasure and enjoyment from it, and so much meaning and purpose into my life from it.
When did you start thinking about coaching? When did you start seeing that as a career option for you?
The second I realized I wasn't going to make it to the NBA. And that was about 23 or 24 years of denial until I finally realized I'm not making it to the NBA. And I took a break. I took a long break. Didn't know I was going to coach, but I knew that I wanted to take a break from playing. And it was no longer a passion of mine. But stepping away from it for 3 or 4 years and focusing on school and other things that I did at the time made me realize that something was missing. And though I couldn't play anymore, I could do something in the game, and coaching became a natural transition for me into a leadership role, a mentorship role, and just being able to, put back into young people what was given to me growing up. So that was always in me, I think.
Were you always a kind of a leader type, or was that something you've grown into?
I was more of a leader by example. I wasn't, at least when I was growing up, I wasn't a vocal kid. I was very shy. I was, I had my small group of friends, but I was keeping to myself. I wasn't this type of guy that was, going to rally everybody behind them and make something happen. That wasn't me. But I showed up every day, and I worked hard. I was consistent. I was reliable. And that was my form of leadership. It was to show that This is what's required of you every day. And if you do that, people will follow. And I felt like at some point in my career as a player, when I was showing that consistently, I was placed in a leadership role and I was able to serve my team better.
That's quite interesting because like I would see myself as well as kind of quite a shy guy, or like I don't, I'm not very vocal in
Mhm.
groups of people and stuff. But that doesn't have to be a limitation on your capacity to lead, is what you're highlighting there for anybody
Yeah,
listening.
it's true. Leadership has no, there's no formula for leadership. You can lead from any position. It's just a matter of will people follow you? Is what you're putting out worth following? And it can
Mm.
be any form.
So how do we get to that place where we've something to do, like something to put out into the world that's worth following? Like, what if somebody's there right now and they have that sense of something missing, like you had with the basketball?
Mhm.
How did they start moving in the direction where they can start creating things that are worthwhile?
You experiment. You go out there and you do different things, and you figure out. It's so funny. In my role right now as a coach, we do a lot of recruiting. Obviously, there's every year there's a new recruiting class, and we're trying to get young women to see the value in coming to play for us. That's what everybody's doing all over the country, but we're asking these young women to commit to going and studying somewhere when they're 17, not really knowing who they are and what they want to be yet. And I feel that you have to learn who you are by experimenting with who you are, by going through things and saying, this I like, this I don't like, this I failed at, and I'm either willing to try again or I'm going to pivot and I'm going to do something completely different, or I just discovered a new passion. It's really hard to find who you are at a young age. And I think that we keep evolving and learning and growing and being challenged, and that shapes us into who we are. And I can tell you that I didn't know what I wanted to do until I was 30. And at 40, I found a second passion with podcasting as well. So we are ever growing and ever changing. It's just submitting to that and saying, okay, I am on a path of finding out who I am. And on that path, I'm going to experiment with some things. I'm going to make some bad choices and I'm going to learn from that. This is your time to experiment. When you're young, when you're 20, even in your late 20s and going into your early 30s, you have so much to fall back on. You haven't really rolled the dice that many times to go bankrupt. You're fine. So I think people just need to experiment and figure out what it is that ignites them inside. And then you go with it. And you might be on the wrong path. So you roll it again and you go with something else that makes you feel strongly about it. And hopefully that's it. It's a trial and error. It's just time.
Mm. Did you always have that perspective on failure and experimentation?
No, not
Do you
until I
remember?
failed a bunch of times.
Yeah. Do you remember like some of the failures that you went through that got you to that perspective?
Oh, for sure. I mean, when I started college, I wanted to be in marketing. So I started a marketing major. And I quickly realized that it wasn't for me, but I stayed in it. And I stayed in it too long. And I almost graduated with a marketing degree until I pivoted and went into psychology. And I got my degree in psychology, but I'm not a psychologist. And I don't do anything in that environment. I do use some of those skills when I'm coaching and leading, but I am not a psychologist. So I started with marketing, pivoted to psychology, and I'm a basketball coach.
What made you pivot to psychology? Do you know?
I feel like it could better translate into what I'm doing right now. I think psychology is understanding, is aspiring to understand the person that you're speaking with first and foremost, and trying to figure out how you can serve them. And that's what I need to do every day. How can I serve the people that I work with and that I interact with? And to me, that was the biggest value is what can I study that will help me in that environment?
Mm. And with your questions, were you always aware of the questions you're asking yourself? Like you seem to have a good question there when you're thinking about coaching and stuff.
No, no, again, I wasn't, I can't even tell you the difference between the person I am now and the person I was 15 years ago. And it was funny. My friend just sent me last week. He sent me a picture of a note that I wrote to him when I was 23 years old and I left to move to the States. He's my best friend over in Israel. And I was reading the message and I was mortified. I didn't recognize the language I was using. I didn't recognize the choice of words, not just necessarily the language, but just putting together sentences the way I did when I was 23 doesn't even sound like me right now. So when I go back to take your time and learn who you are and develop, it is true. It is so true. I didn't have the answers at 23. I thought I did, but I didn't. And I don't have all of them right now, but I think I'm closer to the answer for what is right for me.
Mm. So, like as a coach, when you're looking at a player, what are some of the key attributes you look for in a player?
Coachability. For me, I want to know if this player wants to be poured into and wants to learn. Another thing, I mean, specifically for our team, we have different things that we want to check off and things that we know that are going to work with who we are as a team, who we are as a culture. For us, it's coachability. It's being a good student. We watch very carefully what happens when they come over on a visit and how they treat their parents, how they treat their family, their grandparents. I think showing gratitude is a very powerful thing. And if someone drove you 6 hours for a visit at a school and you cop an attitude with them, you're going to do that with us. So that's very, very telling. And if you're not grateful for an opportunity, that speaks volumes. It doesn't matter how many points you can put up there.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
How about when you went from Israel to America too? Did you see much change in the culture? Like what were some of the key things that stood out to you in the culture, the way people lived?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference. We are in Israel. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. So there are some crossovers in terms of the opportunities you get out there and the general feel of the place. It's very, very Americanized, to, if I can use that word, but there are definitely differences. The temperament in Israel is a lot more, I guess, a lot more heated. We have a much shorter temper, and it's not as trusting as it is here. So I had to really change my way of my day-to-day life over here. I was very guarded over there. I mean, if you left your phone on the table and you went over to grab a soda from the counter, that phone is gone. But over here, it's not. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's not. But there's no such thing as not locking your door or not locking your car, or God forbid, leave your keys in the car. It's all gone. So it was a big shift in that sense. I learned to be a little bit more trusting and less judgmental, because we are quick. Like I said, we jump to conclusions. We heat up real quick. We're microwaves. Over here, it's more of a slow cooker. So yeah, that was one big thing. Language wise, I grew up speaking English, so it was an easier transition for me in that sense. And I used to love American TV shows, so I picked up the slang and the way they speak pretty quickly. So it was a good transition for me.
And so the podcast, when did that come about?
That started. So I'll give you a backstory. The podcast launched on 7/7/19. So this year, about almost 5 months ago. And the backstory of it is I used to post on a nightly basis for about a month and a half. I used to post this thing where I called it my one last thought. And what I was doing is I either found a picture or a quote or something that I saw that moved me, and I would post it. I would put my 2 cents on it. I would say something about it in the comments, and I would call it my one last thought of the day. And that was the last thing I would post on social media, just to put it out there and just share my thoughts on this or that, which I thought was important. I did it for about a month, and the reactions were really positive. People were engaging with it, and they liked it and commented on it. And I felt like people are actually getting something out of it. It's not just me putting stuff out there to put stuff out there. But I realized that I'm only reaching a certain amount of people, and it's only my point of view through the lens of my experiences. And as valuable as that may be, it's only one person's point of view. So I started thinking to myself, I've always wanted to do a podcast, but I'm not really good with that Q&A stuff. It's just not something I'm good at. So what else can I do? And I said, well, maybe if I outsource other people's thoughts, would that be valuable? So I started doing that. I started reaching out to people and collecting their thoughts. And I didn't launch yet. That was about 2 months before, or 3 months before I launched my first episode. So that happened back in April. And I started collecting thoughts, and I asked people to record the answer to this question. If you had one life lesson that you could share with future generations, what would it be? And that's it. And that's the only question I ask. And I have people record it, they send it back to me. And then I started getting all kinds of different responses that were very inspirational to me. And I started thinking, I don't want to be on that podcast. I don't want to have my voice on it. I want to make sure that the message is out there. So what if I combine two messages, a man and a woman, and I mash them up together so I don't have to speak and reintroduce people? And so the finished product is two people answering the same question, speaking about the same things, creating a conversation that never actually happened. And so that's where the inspiration for the podcast came from. I just want to share, just like you, we have an audience of people that we are serving, and we want to share as much as we can with them. And for me, outsourcing for that answer is one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I've learned so many amazing things through it so far. We are 25, almost 26 episodes in on Sunday, and there's hundreds of messages in the inbox, and I can't wait to get to all of them and just keep this thing going for a long time. I'm so excited to share this.
Oh, it's a very cool idea. I hadn't seen a podcast yet where it's that format. Is there any life lesson that stands out in your mind so far from the ones that you've received?
So many. There's one that I always like to share, which I think is very actionable, and that's the focus on this. It's not just somebody, it's not like, and no disrespect to Tony Robbins, I think he's amazing, but it's not somebody telling you, you should do this, you should do that. Those are actual people going through experiences, things that they have lived through, tragedies, hardships, failures, successes, and they're sharing that one thing that they've learned. And so this person, I had a guest on the podcast. His name is Steve Nudelberg. He's a keynote speaker. So his one last thought was something called "Tell Me Something Good," and he's saying that when people greet each other, what usually happens is when someone asks you, "Hey, how you doing?" what we are conditioned to do is immediately go to the negative and complain. Oh, my wife, my back, my car broke down. I'm okay, but I'm not feeling great this week. All that negative stuff. He says, instead of saying, how are you? How are you doing? Why don't you ask, tell me something good. Hey, man, tell me something good. And I actually tried that, and I still do it. And I share that with as many people as I can. And the responses from that are amazing. When you tell someone, hey, tell me something good, they can't tell you any complaint. They have to actually go, oh, wait, you know what? I had the most amazing ice cream last night. Really? Where did you eat? Oh, I went to this little, ice cream place down the street. Oh, man, I want to go there. And it just gets the conversation in that direction. It just puts people in a great state of mind, and they remember that you had that effect on them. And so it's so powerful. It negates negativity, and it makes people associate a good feeling with you triggering that. So little things like that. There are so many different lessons that I've picked up throughout the years. That I have someone on the podcast, and I haven't been able to share her message yet because I couldn't find a counterpart. But she's a suicide survivor. She attempted suicide, and she's talking about the regret of it and the ramifications of what happens when you actually try and commit suicide. And so, the power behind these messages, I felt is it's so powerful, that to use the same word twice, but there's so many to choose from. It's good. Yeah. I like that. It's like real life experiences, people sharing their thoughts from that they want somebody else to pick up on. Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah.
So what was what was the motivation for that? Or what was the motivation for the podcast? Like, did it tie into your story in any way, or was it just that motivation to share?
It's a motivation to create. I keep, Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, is a big, big, big book in my life. And a lot of us read it. And it's phenomenal. And just asking why do you do the things you do is such an important question to ask. And so for years, I've been asking myself why. And I kept going back to this or that. And I heard other people's why, and I was jealous, and I was trying to adapt it to my why. And that sounds so good. Why can't it be my why? But it's not. Your why is your why, and it's different from anybody else's. And so the motivation behind this podcast is my why, and my why is to create. Everything I do in life, I try and create, whether it's through basketball, creating better people, better leaders, better basketball players, creating opportunities for players to come and play for us. And with the podcast, creating a platform where people have a place to share their life experiences, and then creating that platform to engage other people to learn from those experiences. Creating the format, I've realized it literally clicked for me this year. After 40 years on this planet, I finally understand why I'm here. And I am here to create different things. Even at work, I create different processes to scout, to break down numbers, and to figure out why it is that a player likes to go to her right hand, and how many dribbles is she going to put down, and what's going to happen after that. And creating the process to understand when that's going to happen so we can scout better and perform better. I'm here to create. So that is my biggest motivation, not just for the podcast, but in life. Yeah, and I just found out this year. I'm very excited about that.
No, that's a very good why, actually. I find that when I'm not creating that, my mind does just tend to dwell on the negativity, or dwell on just like nothing really. Is focus. My focus kind of goes all over the place. So I like that way. It's good.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to have a purpose with your day, and you have to create the perfect day for yourself so you can be productive and not just waste time, because we're not getting that time back, right?
Yeah, that's it. Do you have any good questions to help somebody be more intentional with their day that you've used in your life?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that, but being put on the spot, I would say, ask yourself, what was the last thing you did that got you as excited as you were when you were a kid? Like, what was the last thing you did that made you go, wow, I can't wait to do that again? And the answers could be silly, but if you dig down through all these answers and you kind of rifle through, you can find some adult activities that you really enjoyed that that got you very, very, very excited. I just finished editing an episode about, creativity and the fact that we suppress our creative side the older we get. We used to be very creative growing up and playing with this and experimenting and using our imagination, and we suppress that. So going back to a place where we feel that we were able to do something that got us excited because we imagined something and made it happen, or we created something, or we did something that got us to feel special inside. What is that? What were those things that we recently did as adults that made us feel good? And I'm a big Gary Vee fan, and he keeps talking about people who go, can't wait for the weekend. We live for Friday and Saturday and Sunday. It's a sad existence when we just can't wait to get through 5 days so we can relax for 2. It's very sad. Why are we Why are we wasting time for 5 days out of the week doing something we hate? Why not ask ourselves those questions? What is it that makes me want to jump out of bed and get started with the day and start working towards that? I feel that it's such an important question that you asked, and we need to ask ourselves that. What can we do that gets us fired up? And if we're not doing that day in and day out, let's re-examine what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Did you always value your time, or
No,
you learned the
no,
hard way?
not at all. I was just thinking about that yesterday. I think what was the term? I'm just killing time. I hate that term now. I can't believe I used to use it, and I used to use it all the time. Hey man, what are you doing right now? Nothing. I'm just killing time. Why? There is no time to kill. And a person who had a near death experience will tell you that better than anybody else. There's no time to kill. We don't know how much time we have. So, not devaluing your time is a disservice to your potential on this planet. Uh, like I said, I didn't have that perspective 15 years ago. I used to waste my time. I used to do things that are so detrimental to what I can bring to the table every day, but I didn't know any better. So I think recognizing that we each have something special in us that we were put on this earth to do is step one. Trying to figure out how to find it is step two. And then utilizing our time the best way possible to maximize that talent is the ultimate step.
Hmm.
So yeah, you have to structure your time, and you have to maximize it, and you have to make sure that you plan your day. I can't stress that enough. Plan your day. Plan your day, every minute of it, because if you look at the biggest CEOs, they all have planners, and every minute of their day is planned. So if we want to be successful and we want to model ourselves after successful people, that's what they do. They don't leave time in their day for stuff that isn't going to move their agenda forward. Because if you don't schedule your time, someone else will. And then you're no longer in control of what you need to do.
Yeah, that's true. How about with books? Do you have any book you'd recommend for somebody who's looking to create their own path? That's some book that stands out in your mind.
The So I'm more into audiobooks right now because it's so hard for me to sit down and read. I it's hard for me to find the patience, the time. I kind of try and double my time. So my commute, I listen to audiobooks every time we are on the road and I'm on the bus. I'll listen to audiobooks. Um, so I'll do that. So one audiobook that I recently read that I really loved was called Burn Your Goals, and I can't remember who the author is right now, but I'm pretty sure your audience can Google that and find it real quickly. Burn Your Goals, and it's such a neat concept. And they're talking about when we set a certain goal for ourselves, that's nice, but it's also very limiting. Let's just say you want to. I'll just give a basketball analogy because I'm close to that. Let's just say one of our players on the teams, their goal this year is to average 8 rebounds a game. Very nice number. Okay. So their goal is to average 8 rebounds a game. I'm a numbers guy, so I like to break it down. So if you're playing 4 quarters, all you have to do is average 2 rebounds per quarter. Okay. So that's 2 rebounds per quarter. If you are satisfied with meeting the 8 rebound goal, that's great. But if you don't set that as a goal and you say, I'm going to set a standard, my standard is every minute that I'm on the floor, I'm going to hunt down those rebounds and I'm going to grab as many as I can. I'm going to win every physical fight. I'm going to get to those positions the best way I can. If I can't get 2 hands on the ball, I'm going to get 1 hand on the ball. If I can't get 1 hand on the ball, I'm going to get 1 finger on the ball and I'm going to tip the ball and I'm going to win that rebound for our team. If you do that and you do that consistently every day, every time you get an opportunity to get on the floor, at the end of the game, you look at the stat sheet, 8 rebounds is probably going to be your bare minimum. So they're talking about standards over goals. Goals are great if you're trying to go from point A to point B. Standards get you at a high level over a long period of time. If you set a standard to be the best that you can be, and you set a plan for that standard, you're going to surpass most of your written goals, because we sometimes tend to hit the mark and we slow down. There's no reason to slow down. So that's the biggest takeaway from that book.
That's good. Standards versus goals. Yeah, like it. So do you have? What's your one final thought today?
Oh, you flipped it on me. That's nice. Um, Man, again, another one that no one's flipped it on me yet. So you are the first one. All right. Okay. My one last thought is always remember where you came from. And I feel that if we remember where we came from, who we are right now will have no bearings on who we were in the beginning. Most of us, if not all of us, come from humble beginnings. We can be very successful right now, but if we stay true to who we were as kids, to the people that helped us through everything that we've gone through in life, being humble, being genuine, recognizing that you couldn't do this, no matter how successful you are, you couldn't do this by yourself. Someone along the way helped you. Living humbly in that will make us better people, regardless of who we are right now. Because the people that I don't like to associate with are people who, quote unquote, made it and changed. You are no better than who you were as a kid. If you were a good person at some point and success or money or position or opportunity changed you, shame on you. I feel like we always need to remember where we came from, and we need to live humbly in the realization that none of this was achieved just by us on our own. Someone helped us. So we got to be respectful of that.
It's a good thought. Yeah, I like it. So
You
how would
flipped it
you?
on me, man. That was good. I wasn't
Oh, that's
expecting.
good. I've been thinking of that recently as well. It's like that was one of the things for me is like getting back to who I was and what I enjoyed as a child and that type of stuff. And like you're saying there, it's staying humble, even if you can succeed in life, staying humble and coming from that place. That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So yeah, how would these guys find you online then?
You can find me anywhere online. If you Google One Last Thought, either the word one or the number one, Twitter and Instagram is the number one, and then Last Thought, One Last Thought Pod. So anywhere, like I said, One Last Thought Pod, anywhere online, either at my Gmail at one last thought pod at gmail.com. But just find the podcast. You'll find all the information you need there. You'll be able to reach out. If you have a thought you want to share, find me on social media, reach out, and I'm so happy to connect with you and bring your thought to our audience and learn from you.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so for anybody listening, I'd recommend reaching out to you. And if you've got a thought to share from a real life experience, then you'll help them to share it. So yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I wish you all the best with your podcast and with your career as a coach. Thanks for sharing the story and the motivation behind what you do today. Yeah, so thanks again, Ido.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thanks, man. So until next time, have fun and enjoy the process.